Мені дуже приємно представити Ірину Геращенко, вона народний депутат.
Iryna Gerashchenko, People's Deputy of Ukraine, First Deputy Head of Committee on European Integration, Presidential Agent on Peaceful Regulation.
Media on European integration. She received a mandate from the Ukrainian president to conduct peace talks in Luhansk and Donetsk, and we're very pleased to have her here. Будь ласка.
Esteemed colleagues, thank you for this opportunity to have a briefing, and I would like to start with a statement that the peaceful settlement in the East is the primarily objective of the President, and establishment of such a position as the presidential envoy on the peaceful settlement in the East proves that the President has is full of resolution to resolve the problem. The major person, the major figure in Ukraine to settle the situation in the East is President Poroshenko. Actually, his everyday agenda is subjected to this task, and he communicates with our European colleagues, stimulating them to fulfill their commitments to Ukraine. My position entails close communication with mass media, with the diplomatic corps, with the international missions, and to communicate the presidential plan. This is the scope of my mandate. Many people call me and ask questions whether negotiations are planned. The position of the President is as follows. He is open for the dialogue with Lugansk, Donetsk, and any other region in the East. And moreover, there are scheduled two meetings for the President. The first meeting with the mayors from the East, for the meeting with those who will manage to get here. Today we received messages from several mayors from the East who informed us that they will be unable to come here. Of course, the President will speak to the legal mayors, not to so-called people's mayors, because nowhere in the world the legal administration of the country never negotiates with terrorists who rape Ukrainian women, who kill Ukrainian citizens, who actually maintain social disorder in the territory, while militia simply collects the claims from citizens. Actually, we try to use any opportunity to bring order to public order to that area. The President has very strong intent to use any opportunity to bring peace to that area. With this purpose, he has strengthened relations with the National Security and Defense Council, and actually all the new appointments made by the President, specifically new Prosecutor General, new Minister of Foreign Affairs, newly appointed Chairman of the National Bank of Ukraine. all these candidates suggested, all these nominees suggested by the president, they got support from more than 300 votes in the parliament. And there's only proves that stabilization in Ukraine could be reached through the efforts of all governmental officials, all politicians which are in power today. And now I would like to describe briefly the peaceful plan suggested by the president, which comprises 14 different items. Also, I would like to mention that besides that meeting with mayors and representatives of the eastern regions, those who are ready to maintain peace and cooperate with Ukrainian law enforcement agencies. Afterwards, he will meet with the representatives of local businesses and representatives of local business elites and heroes of Ukraine, those people who are influential in their regions. Presidential administration has received many letters and applications from a lot of people, from bloggers, from civil activists, from businessmen, from social activists who would like to assist in bringing order and peace into the region. I believe that we should build up all these contacts and strengthen the network of people who are ready to work for the peaceful settlement in the region. Unfortunately, the informational space in the eastern regions is ruined. The TV tower is the TV tower is conquered by militants, and unfortunately, despite the fact that we pay for broadcasting, but TV channels broadcast the dirty information, deceitful information from Russian Federation. All the newspapers in the region are turned into provocatory leaflets issued by separatists. I believe that afterwards, later, we will sue these newspapers for defamation and for breaching of Ukrainian legislation and for all the calls to violence. So our main task today is to reach the hearts and minds of people in the East. There are only several percent, not numerous percentage of people there who still want to join Russia. On the other hand, the majority of people understand the requirements and suggestions from Ukrainian authorities, and our major objective is to reach these people by various means through channels of information and at the people's level. In the nearest future, the president of Ukraine is ready to announce unilaterally the suspension of fire for a very short period of time. During this very short period of time, there should be made two safety corridors, one for civil people who would like to leave the area, and another corridor for military units who should turn back to their place of origin, that is, to cross the border and go back. The second task is to close the border, to create the border, not to allow even to a fly to cross it, not even to a tank, because in the nearest past we had no border line with Russia at all. Actually, there was simply a pillar showing two signs, to Ukraine and to Russia, and that's it. The third, so the corridor, the frontier, the fourth issue is disarmament. Ukrainian government is ready to provide amnesty to those people who did not commit violence and who has no blood on their hands. Those who participated in committing hard crimes like slander, like raping, like imprisoning people, like torturing people. And also one of the conditions of the president is to liberate hostages who are forcibly kept in the prisons in Donetsk and Luhansk. Also, the president will suggest amendments to constitution which will grant broad authorities, broad power and authority to the regions. Then the president will suggest early parliamentary elections in autumn this year, since it became obvious that this parliament do not correspond to the vision of Ukrainian people today. But we should ensure that in the eastern regions, parliamentary elections will be possible, and that in result of those elections, adequate people will be elected, those who won't bully people, but those who will deal with the local issues. Also, the president has the vision that this eastern region requires a very special approach from economic point of view, from social point of view, that it requires very efficient work on creating new jobs. And he has started his work on thinking about creating new jobs and peaceful settlement for the region. Thank you.
On to Dmitriev, Department of Education, I'd like to put two questions. Number one, journalists are now admitted to Mr. Poroshenko's meeting with the mayors, and the presidential administration refused accreditation for the meetings that you mentioned in your introduction. So how will you convey this information if journalists are not admitted at the presidential inspection? This is number one. And secondly, probably you know the number of refugees, because nobody in Ukraine, for a week, I've tried to dig up some information. The Ministry of Interior, nobody can provide me with this information. Thank you very much. Journalists are always welcome. In this case, in the format of invitation. This is an invitation, not clearance. This is for mayors and business representatives. It's important for us all to understand that sometimes some talks are conducted behind closed doors. So all the formats, all the people can say whatever they want to say without any ears. other than their own. And I will provide you with information on who attended the meeting. For example, it's also a security matter. We in Kiev were safe, but recently we had terrible times. But we had that brotherly and sisterly feeling about each other, and we did not expect each other to be dangerous. And people are afraid talking to cameras. They provide all the information to me and say, Iryna, we do not want our names mentioned. Don't quote me. So those mayors depend to a different force ideologically, but we praise their lives, and we have to provide for security of every single individual in Ukraine. And that's what makes us different from the other country. 10 plus, 10 minus, they believe that their women will bear new children to replace the gone ones. But, of course, the information available for the press will be provided in due course. About the refugees, it's a good question. So it happened that we should use the right terms. We have displaced persons. Internally displaced persons, they are citizens and they are not refugees, they're temporarily displaced persons internally from the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. This is coordinated by several agencies, and we have some kind of miscoordination there, but the decision is taken to form the Center for such displaced persons at the Ministry of Interior, Department of Extraordinary Situations, and all the information should go to that hub, but mostly this information is with the Ministry of Social Policy, because they receive all the information on resettlements for such displaced persons and social support, social protection. Minister Denisova has all the information, so I suggest that you invite her to Ukraine Crisis Media Center. We talked to each other at the beginning of this week, and at that point, with the displaced persons, we had about 30,000 people registered. But we can understand that there are more, because in fact, the Ministry of Social Policy can take into account only those who officially contacted the hotline of theirs and registered, and that provides for some temporary accommodation. And all the regions concerned provided information on their capacity to accommodate displaced persons. There are very few people who are on the waiting list of the employment office. Maybe they can find the jobs independently. 2,000 pensioners decided to receive their pensions in a different place. About 1,000 families applied for social protection, kindergartens. This is not our fault, but also the people who did not register officially, and now volunteer organizations are taking care of them. So creation of such displaced persons center is very important, because they will be able to maintain contact with the volunteers, and they will provide for all the chores related to them.
I understand very clear that the government does not want to talk to bandits and terrorists, but if the government wants to declare a ceasefire, an amnesty, open a corridor, at one point you will need to talk to someone, you will need to explain when and how. Do you already have some contacts? At which level, or do you think you will have those contacts, and with who?
Thank you very much for your question. I will answer in Ukraine with your permission. As to contacts, I would like to say that President of Ukraine is now just in preparation of the ceasefire. It will be a very short ceasefire, and when it will be announced on what day It will be one of these days, but it's up to the president. It will depend also on our talks with the Western partners, and other aspects should be taken into account. I cannot say more, but as soon as we have more information about the opening of such corridors, for whom, for and how, and what's the arrangement, I will tell you. Valery Volkov, as an MP, as a special advisor to Mr. Poroshenko, can you tell us, as a professional, you understand all the responsibility of the temporary ceasefire and armistice during the real war in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, when part of Ukraine is annexed and there's the law of the temporary occupied territories. This is not a real life war. I'm back from Kerch. I'm Ukrainian from Kerch in the Crimea, and 300 children from Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast who were seized by the terrorists are now in the territory of the Russian Federation, and without consent of their parents, without any consent from the government, from the president of Ukraine, they were dispatched to different parts of the Russian Peninsula, and that includes Kerch. This long temporary occupied territories has to do, first of all, with the Crimea. Luhansk and Donetsk Oblasts are not covered by the status. They have the status of the regions with the anti-terrorist operation. All the decisions are made by the President of Ukraine after very careful consideration and looking to the information that comes also from our military officers. We are now in the middle of very important work on strengthening our borders, because without that effort we cannot start any other story. We have to block the pathways for arms supplies and cases with money, with cash from the Yanukovych family in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast. We have to cut it off. And when Mr. Poroshenko became president, he took responsibility for 50 million people. And we have no doubt that the responsibility is his as leader of the state. It's obvious, but speaking of taking any decision under such difficult circumstances for the first time in modern history of Ukraine, of course it's difficult, and all the decisions were made with consideration of the external, internal, and other factors. Speaking of information of the children, I'd like to emphasize that Kerch is Ukraine, and all the international meetings attended by the president have the crime on the agenda. We do not recognize Crimea as Russian territory. It's not a bargaining chip in any way. We have to save lives of our people in the east. That's the most important thing. And that includes children. Many efforts are made, as you know, for the areas where we have the landmines and the shelling, grenade launchers, and portable air defense units. And they can fire at houses, at residential housing, and there are elderly people accommodated there who cannot leave. And this is another testament to the fact that in Ukraine we have a totally different approach to human life. In the East, they do not understand our activities, but they have to understand that for each law enforcement officer, it's a peace plan. It's not a war plan from the president, but of course to protect and defend human lives without blocking the borders and applying force to the mercenaries. It's very difficult to avoid that. So the peace plan is the last warning, the last opportunity for the people to give up their arms And if it doesn't happen, we all realize we'll come back together and discuss what happens. I said in the extraordinary news, we had combatants from IDA battalion. If this ceasefire is unilateral, they say, and terrorists will entrench themselves and will now be smoked out their holes. President of Ukraine takes into account all the communications, all the information that is provided by the active agents in the anti-terrorist operation area, SBU, National Guard, volunteers battalions, Ministry of Interior. But yesterday, you know, last night we had that terrible tragedy. Our heroes, our combatants were killed when they were there to support their comrades in arms, and they were destroyed by mercenaries. But President of Ukraine would like to emphasize that the military discipline should be strict and straightforward. It's not a guerrilla war. There should be coordination among all the military units with arms. It's necessary to coordinate our effort even in the information war. Information war can destroy somebody's mind, somebody's consciousness, but real war is fighting for lives and should be super serious in terms of coordination. And this has been analyzed at the general staff also, and President is applying to all the battalion commanders. We have to clearly coordinate all the operations with the regular forces, because otherwise we'll face this terrible discoordination or miscoordination. We have to get together. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? If you have any questions, you can approach Iryna Gerashchenko personally.